Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with my good friend, my esteemed co-host, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party here in New York, as well as the Suffolk County Chair. Welcome back, Jesse, and welcome back to our listeners. Well, Jesse...
You're on. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't step on you there.
No, I tell you, Jesse, it's absolutely amazing. When I sit down and work with you over the weekend, and during the week to put together a list of topics to discuss, we're never at a shortage of topics because information is moving so quickly and the world is changing so rapidly that you're never at a loss for topics.
That is true. That's very true. And I mean, in this fast-paced world where it's a 24-hour news cycle, I think what we're getting is we're just getting development after development after development. And I think part of this is also the timing of the year. You know, some of these things that come crashing down and some of these things that become exposed also have a type of time of occurring at the year end when people hope that they're not looking at things, that the public is not watching. But some of these items are far too big for people to ignore them.
So there's the so-called holiday of Friday night dump, right?
Exactly.
Get
Put
bad
it out the trash.
Right. So let's start off with the first one, which is a matter of real concern to me, and I want to get your thoughts on that. That is the prisoner exchange that just took place where the Biden administration let the merchant of death out for a female African-American lesbian basketball player, and this was hailed by the Biden administration as a great achievement, and it was just wonderful, and they heralded her identity politics. Isn't that swell? And they totally forgot about the former Marine who's been locked away there for years, as well as one other person. They just let them sit there, and nothing's happening. So what did you think about that? And I'll tell you what my thoughts are. But you start, please.
I think it's an ill-conceived deal. First and foremost, it doesn't matter the race or we all know it doesn't matter who the person is. But the fact of the matter is this is an individual that, I mean, if we're going to do a prisoner exchange, we should get all our prisoners out and about and get them all back. But what we did here is what did we pay here? We paid by releasing a notorious arms dealer, the merchant of death, someone that we had in custody for 12 years, someone of great importance to Russia and the leadership there, someone who probably knows where he's got some of his weapons still stashed somewhere that Russia is in desperate need of. And what we did is we didn't get back the major asset that we needed, major assets being that Marine, this basketball player, and any other American that is incarcerated wrong. Let's not forget, this basketball player was there. She knew the rules, and she couldn't not have weed for a week, so she brought it with her. I mean, you got to respect the rules of the country you're going into. But, this is not about that woman. This is more about the fact that we let off a notorious merchant of death arms dealer whose blood of American soldiers, innocent lives, it's on his hands. He did it for the state that is Russia, and we left our assets still incarcerated. This was a bad deal for America, a bad deal for democracy, a bad deal for all Americans that are stuck in these type of situations.
Well, it also, just that's all very well said, but it also puts a target on the back of every American for any renegade state or any terrorist group, because it shows the Biden administration continues to be foolish, naive, and weak. And you don't have to be in Russia or China or Iran to get picked up. You could be walking down the streets of Paris and be grabbed by a terrorist group. You could be in Rome and be grabbed by a terrorist group, whether domestic or foreign. You could be in Sweden and be grabbed by it. Anytime you're an American and you're off base out of the United States, they can grab you and trade you for something that they want. Could it be 50 terrorists who bombed airplanes out of the sky or shot up airports or blew up trains? I mean, what are they talking about when they say this was a good trade? It was a terrible trade. It put a target on the back of every American as a potential hostage. And as you correctly point out, this gentleman, and I use that term very loosely, is a merchant of death. He's responsible for the death of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And if you want to play identity politics, the way the press secretary, who's probably one of the dumbest human beings ever to have that position, where you need a smart person as press secretary at the White House, she starts talking, checking the boxes that this was an African-American woman. Let me point out to you that of the thousands and thousands of people who were killed in these wars, a lot of those wars took place in Africa. So the victims of this gun runner, of this merchant of death, were fellow blacks. So, I mean, how do you equate that? It's so ridiculous. It makes your eyes bleed and your head explode. So they put a target on this. They leave behind a guy who shouldn't be left behind, who's been there for 4 years. So just on the equity, she was there 10 months. He's there 4 years. Where's the fair trade? And then to identify it based on identity politics, there's only one identity that counts, Jesse. And you know what that is? That this was an American. Not their sexual orientation, not that they play basketball, not that they come from a racial group. They're an American. And this American, by the way, who was bailed out, is the same one who contemptuously talked about the United States, who took a knee and wouldn't show the respect for the Star-Spangled Banner. I'd like to know what her opinion is now of this country who bailed her out.
I agree with you. And like I said, I'm the type of person that, you're an American, we're going to come out and save you. But, we have to make sure that we are doing good deals. This is consistent with the Democratic administrations of the past 25 years. They do bad deals. The Clinton administration did terrible deals when they did NAFTA. The Biden and now first the Obama and now the Biden administration are doing these terrible deals. First, with the Iran, deals and release, get them off of sanctions, and the nuclear deal that they did, that was wrong. Biden allowing to turn his back on allowing the sanctions to come off so that Russia could do its pipeline up through Europe and connect to Europe. These are bad deals that the Democrats do. I'm not sure, if there's collusion, it's collusion because of stupidity or negligence. And I hope it's not profiteering, and we haven't even gotten into the laptop yet.
Well, as you know, our guest from last week's show, Eric Levine, has these lunches, and he always has very interesting people at the lunches. And Eric's office is right across the street from mine, and I go to those lunches. And yesterday we had lunch with Morgan Ortagus, and Morgan Ortagus was the spokesperson for the United States Department of State in the Trump administration and worked directly with Secretary Pompeo, the Secretary of State, who was actually a Secretary of State who understood his business. And she said as follows: it's a terrible trade. It's consistent with, as you point out, with the foreign policy, which is negligent or mindless at best, and maybe corrupted at worst. And I hope to God that's not true. But you don't know until you know, with all these payoffs to young Hunter Biden, who's a village idiot, who has no skill set and is a junkie. Why were they giving him tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars? For what purpose other than to influence peddle? He was taking the money as influence peddler, and they were peddling their influence to try to have Chinese or Russian or Ukrainian influence in our government decision makers, and that's a real problem. So Morgan was talking about bad deals, and she said, look, she reaffirmed what you and I have been talking about. She talked about the axis of evil, the same term of art that you and I have been using. And she says, look, you have to understand, never have they been more united in our lifetime. It's China, it's Russia, it's Iran, and now you see that Xi goes and cuts a deal with Saudi Arabia. So not only have we built up Iran, but now we weakened our relationship with Saudi Arabia. So who's the countervailing force against the Iranian Ayatollahs and their dreams of world domination? I mean, it's frightening. And so Morgan was talking about that. She's worried about the axis of evil. She's worried about the bad deals. She says the Iran deal has always been a bad deal, which you and I have been saying. It never was to stop them getting nuclear weapons. It was just to slow it down a little bit. And we gave them hundreds of millions of billions of dollars. And you know what they did with that money? They funded terrorism and destabilized the Middle East, and they destabilized countries. It's a very frightening situation when you have naivete and foolishness in the White House, in our State Department, in our Defense Department.
And think about it. You're right. We have just put a target on every American's back that this is able to be done, and we're going to, pay a significant payoff. And it makes us look weak as a nation on the global stage.
Well, Ronald Reagan had it right. The only way you're going to get peace is you get peace through strength. You have to be able
absolutely
to have an Army, Navy, Air Force, the technology, the funding, and get away from the woke culture. You don't want soldiers who are worried about which pronoun they're using. You want men and women in the armed forces who know how to fight to protect and defend this country. Wokeism is not going to protect us. Wokeism is a sign of weakness. It means that you don't have your eye on the ball. You don't understand the existential threat that's facing us through China. China has, Jesse, a better army than we have, a better Air Force than we have, a better Navy than we have. They've built up, as you and I have talked about, these false islands where they're moving their people into the Pacific Rim. It's a threat to Vietnam, Japan, South Korea. This is a very serious matter, and we're worried about pronouns. They just did a defense budget, and we've talked about this defense budget issue with Congressman Garbarino in the past, and the problem is the defense budget just accounts for inflation. It's not an increase in the real funding. It just accounted for the 8% increase in inflation. So that means we're status quo. We're not going anywhere to develop the real strength that we need. And they're advancing against us in artificial intelligence military gimmicks, too. This is a very serious problem.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And I can't, the one thing that they may be throwing a lot of money at their China, at their armed services, but the one thing that we have is the U.S., U.S. soldier, those men and women. There is no one more dedicated than those individuals to the American cause of liberty, freedoms, and making sure we stay safe. But you're right.
How long is that going to last?
Congressman McCarthy.
How long is that going to last if they keep doing this woke nonsense in the Pentagon?
I agree with you. That's why we need a reset. We need a hard reset in the Pentagon. You can't have this wokeism going forward. We need to abide and be humane, but we also need to have war fighters there to make sure that another 9/11 does not happen in these shores. And that's one of the things you can credit President Bush and President Trump, is that they ensured by giving the military the tools that it's needed and the training it's needed for its soldiers, the American soldiers, and the pay they needed, and the technology, they made sure that we kept those battles, those bad guys, off our shores, and we fought them on their turf, not ours.
Always a good thing to do. You don't want to be playing defense on your own territory. Absolutely correct. Kevin's given us a sign. We're going to take a break. This is Judge Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. This is the Long Island Report. Stay tuned. We have more interesting conversation going forward.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back. This is the Long Island Report. We are continuing our second segment with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, there was a scandal that broke in cryptocurrency. The name of the company, Jesse, was FTX. You had this young man, supposed to be a child wonderkind, Bankman-Fried, or whatever his name was. His two parents were law school professors at Stanford University, a great law school. He was supposed to be a genius. He was getting a free pass from all the regulators, getting a free pass from the Democrats in the U.S. Senate, the United States House of Representatives, an unregulated industry, an unregulated company. And what happened, Jesse, to FTX?
Well, FTX went bankrupt. And now their principal, as you said,
Bankman-Fried, or whatever his name is.
Sam Bankman-Fried, yeah, there's three names. Or as he's known in the cryptocurrency community, SBF, was hiding away in Bahamas. He was still taking meetings. He was doing Zoom calls. I think he was doing some, crisis management, walking around Bahamas free as a bird in his shorts and his T-shirts, right after he built hundreds of millions of dollars. And we're talking about, this is on the scale of the
Madoff?
Oh, Madoff scandal. Thank you so much for filling that up. And it's ironic. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but ironically, a day before he was to testify in front of the House of Representatives Financial Services Committee to speak about this issue, he was arrested by the Bahamian law enforcement at the request of the United States U.S. Attorney's Office for bilking all these shareholders. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. And this affects, retirement funds. It affects Silicon Valley. It even affects celebrities who were touting this type of cryptocurrency, like Tom Brady.
And Larry David.
And Larry David. What we have here was a house of cards. And there's SBF was funding. I think it was the last number I know was somewhere in the area of 36 in campaign contributions to prominent members of the Senate and the House. And I saw them, and I saw an experience firsthand here on Long Island in the 1st Congressional District. They were, it's my estimation, and I'm alleging this, that this industry with SBF was creating a cryptocurrency caucus in the Congress to protect their interests. And I do think that they did see this type of collapse coming, which is why they were using these investment funds, illegally commingling the funds, and then giving them campaign contributions so that they could stay away from regulations, so they could do self-oversight and to prevent this type of.
So, Jesse, let me tell you my problems. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist either. But Andy McCarthy just wrote a piece in the National Journal indicating it's far from a coincidence that literally on the eve of his testimony before the House committee, that all of a sudden he was picked up and he was unable to testify. Any defense lawyer will tell you that you wouldn't want this guy to be testifying before a congressional committee on the eve of being arrested and having an indictment unsealed. Anybody in the right minds would not let him do that because he got himself tripped up for the criminal trial. So the smart money was to keep him off. That was from a legal point of view. From the political point of view, what were the Democrats who control that committee under Maxine Waters, who's taken tons of money from him and the other Democrats on that committee, why were they so anxious not to have him testify? Because if he started naming names about who he gave the money to and what the conversations were, they would be more than embarrassed. It's a very big deal. Now, he's facing an 8-count indictment, for wire fraud, mail fraud, securities fraud, campaign finance fraud. What he did is, as you correctly point out, he commingled money. So he took money and he used it to buy real estate, buy himself other items, and use on campaign contributions to political figures. whether in the House or the Senate. This is a very, very big deal. So that 8-count indictment is over his head. He's looking at over 100. If there's a conviction on those counts, he's looking at over 100 years in jail. Now, he has a presumption of innocence, and I'd like to see how this thing unfolds. At the same time, the Securities and Exchange Commission, not to be outdone by the United States Attorney's Office of Southern District, filed a civil lawsuit alleging frauds and misallocation and misuse of investment monies. So this is a big deal. It's a big scandal, which seems to me to lead to the next question. Why is this industry not regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission? Why are they let off the hook? They shouldn't be off the hook. This should be a regulated industry, which then raises the next question, Jesse. I thought the Constitution of the United States made it very, very clear it's only the government of the United States that can create money, can create currency. What is this cryptocurrency stuff all about? It's a company that makes up their own currency. Who's regulating? Who's watching it? Where's the bookkeeping? And if I want to redeem it, how do I get it? You know, I just don't understand how that thing works. Now, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I'd like to know where my money is. What do you say?
I agree with you. And listen, I'm not one for regulations, over-regulations. I think that hampers businesses and such, but I'm talking about in terms of infrastructure and small businesses. We're not talking about a company that's trying to create a new currency that we can't hold, and it's not tangible. It's in digital form. You can carry it around in maybe what is called a fund drive. I mean, we're talking about $8 billion in customer funds that were lost. They were built, they were commingled, and this 30-year-old tried to explain away his culpability. And I'll tell you why he was. Now, this is just, I'm believing this. I believe this to be a possibility. I'm alleging it. It's not fact. Those people who received $36 million in these campaign contributions that were illegal because they were commingled with these $8 billion in customer funds, they did not want this person to come forward, because for that $36 million to work for that industry, all of this would have been out in the open. And all of a sudden, he would have been able to leverage himself. Now, if he was smart, he would have had his lawyer, and you're a judge. You've probably seen this before, and you've been in the private sector. You know, he should have copped a deal and started rolling on those people that he helped bribe to, allow this type of action to move forward. I mean, this is huge. It is huge, and it has long tentacles politically, financially, and lawfully.
Well, and I think the one who's copped the deal, and I have no inside information, but I think the girlfriend has not been arrested.
Yes.
Now, he's pointing the finger at her, and she's pointing the finger at him. You know, they're playing the blame game. I think she's the one who copped the deal that got to her, and she's giving up the information. And that's why
absolutely.
That's why the indictment came out again. They didn't indict her so far. And so let's see what happens with that. But if I had a bet, based on my experience as a former Assistant Attorney General of the state and a law clerk to a federal judge and a Supreme Court justice myself, I think there was a deal here. I'd be very surprised if she didn't cut a deal already for herself to get off the hook.
Absolutely. The word on the street is that she is rolling, and that's why the U.S. Attorney's Office was able to rather quickly bring this arrest charge and this indictment, when usually, as you know, these type of cases take a long time. They plod along to make sure they stick. But that's what, I believe that she is rolling. Now, here's the thing. If we're going to be conspiracy theorists, I think we need to watch out. There's really a conspiracy here to shut him up. Unfortunately, he'll end up dead. Well,
I think that's the problem. Somebody better be putting him under 24-hour watch. Because first of all, I think
they did that with the other guy, Jeffrey Epstein.
That worked out well, didn't it? That didn't work out very well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how the mainstream media just walked away from that. Under 24-hour surveillance in isolation, and he was able to, Jeffrey Epstein was able to kill himself, so he wasn't able to testify against some prominent.
Well, I still want to see what was in that little black book of Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know who's on that plane, who was on that island, and how they were connected.
Bill Clinton was on that plane. We know Bill Clinton was on that plane on that island. We know some of our captains of industry were on that plane and on that island. God knows what it is. We know that a member of the royal family has been implicated in this. So it's widespread, and you know what? It was too big. The elitists had to shut it down so that they could protect themselves, so they could protect their country club.
You know, it's very funny because you have a conversation, you're talking about the Epstein situation, and you're talking about this FTX scandal. Sometimes you think you're just watching a movie on cable television that came out of one of the cable studios or Hollywood, because it's so fantastic you can't believe that this stuff is for real. That you have this kid who's totally inarticulate, who's a mental case, who's constantly taking medications, to keep himself calm. He goes up there and he talks double talk in this disinformation campaign to try to, set the stage because he knew what was coming. And if you listen carefully, he's just talking gibberish. It makes no sense. What were they investing in?
Let's be honest. You're counsel to John Catsimatidis and his media empire. If someone came to you and John Catsimatidis and took these two stories, the Epstein story and the FTX story with FBS, and they said, "Hey, let's make a movie. Let's fund a book," you would say it's too fairy tale. It's unbelievable. You wouldn't be able to publish it or do it. But here it is, playing out in real life. It's amazing.
I mean, so I guess we can come to a conclusion, Jesse, as Kevin gives us that sign to take that sometimes true life is even stranger than fiction. So let's take a break. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Jesse Garcia, the chair of the Republican Party out in Suffolk County and the vice chair of the state Republican Party. A few moments with more interesting conversations.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. So, Jesse, a guy named Elon Musk, who's most famous for making these electric cars called Tesla, went and bought himself for a lot of money something called Twitter. And we now have a big scandal involving Twitter. And why does this matter to America's future as a free country? What is this all about? What happened with Twitter, and why is this important? Your take, Jesse.
Well, I think it's important because you had here this big corporation that was working hand in hand with the government and government officials and law enforcement officials, the FBI and political parties like the DNC, to suppress suppress information that would have been important to their voters. And they were complicit and cooperative. They were like partners in this. They were suppressing conservative voices. They were called what's called shadow banning. They were making sure they banned prominent Republican conservative voices. They banned the president from Twitter, Donald Trump, and they banned the New York Post and all those media outlets that were trying to rightfully explain to voters through extensive investigative reporting the Hunter Biden laptop. They first portrayed it as Russian collusion. 50 of these partisan CIA operatives from Democrats and Republicans that are part of the deep state came out and said it was Russian collusion, only to find out a year later, after the elections lost and gone, that it wasn't Russian collusion and that the Hunter Biden laptop was true. All this is going on, and we have a First Amendment right. If you're going to have protections, if a company like Twitter is going to have protections under the government, so for liability and such for what is posted, then they have an obligation to allow voices. We can define hate. You can identify hate and so on and so forth. There's no place for anti-Semitism or racism and inciting riots and inciting violence. That's true. That's all fair game. But to share information on a story that was well vetted, and even the New York Times had to admit that the Hunter Biden laptop did exist. It did contain the information first reported in the New York Post, and that is now the subject of future, congressional inquiries and investigations. So, we need to have confidence in these big media companies that, there's transparency and it's an open forum. That if you're going to benefit from the government, from liability, that you allow a full-throated, open platform for all voices, not just the ones that are favored to you. And what's important here is that the Twitter files have been released by Elon Musk. He has now become, the bane of evil for the lefties and the progressives and the Democrats, because he's telling the truth and he's pulling back the curtain on what happened. But most important, Your Honor, Jack Dorsey, the founder and the CEO, he came out just recently. In fact, it was earlier this week, where he said, if there's somebody to blame, it's me. I should have pushed back harder on these progressive companies, these progressive investment firms that were dictating what is speech and what is not speech, what should be allowed and what should not be allowed. We should never have had algorithms that allowed, who can see what. So here's the president, the founder and the former CEO, who was forced out by liberal investors, companies, by $11 billion and such, because his thought of a platform that was open and fair and transparent was being manipulated by the FBI, by private interests, and the Democratic National Committee.
Well, this is the problem. The country has a constitution, and the First Amendment in the Constitution provides for freedom of speech, that the government, Congress, shall make no law which will abridge the freedom of speech. So what you have here is you have the argument, well, this wasn't Congress making a law. These were independent private actors. Okay, I understand that argument, except for one thing. They were working in the most collusive way to suppress the story of Hunter Biden laptop and the influence peddling gambit alleged against the Biden family, including Joe Biden, who is the vice president of the United States, who's now our president. So they deliberately suppressed that story. Somewhere between 97 and 99% of the people who worked for Twitter are Democrats and gave to Democratic campaigns. So there wasn't any people on the inside of Twitter who were dealing with Republicans. There weren't people on the inside who wanted to give a voice to Republicans. It was all controlled as an apparatus of the Democratic Party. It's been established through the releases by Musk that they were working hand in glove with the Democratic National Committee and with the Biden Campaign Committee. So that's established. There's also been established that there were regular meetings between the FBI and other governmental agencies with these megatech operations throughout the campaign, giving them broad hints that this might be a disinformation campaign, giving them an alert. The problem, of course, is they had the laptop for months and months and months, maybe as much as a year, and they could have gone through it. They could have tested the laptop, done an investigation, but they sat on it. So the guy from the repair shop who turned over the FBI, who expected to be called back and to be heard on this issue, was never called back, and they kept this laptop suppressed. So the FBI suppressed the laptop. Don't tell me they sat on it for all that time because they didn't have enough technicians to open up and figure out what was going on, do an investigation. Similarly, this guy, Tony Bobulinski, who's been on Tucker Carlson for interviews, made it very, very clear that based on his conversations with Joe Biden was the big guy who had a piece of the action that Hunter Biden was dealing with. I don't know if that's true. I make no accusations against President Biden, but that's worthy of an investigation at the very least. And the fact of the matter is, the polling has shown that a substantial number of the people who voted for Joe Biden amongst the Democratic constituency, 16% of them, if they knew about the laptop and the allegations against the Bidens for influence peddling and the payoffs to the family through Hunter Biden, would have voted differently in that election. So while Trump was hung up about, whether there were ballots being stuffed, and I have no opinion on that issue, this was a real scandal. The real scandal was that they suppressed Miranda Devine's investigation. They suppressed the New York Post columns. You couldn't get it out there. People were deplatformed. They were cut off from speaking about it. The Washington Post and the New York Times and all the big media companies said it was just laughable. It was a joke. It was nonsense. It was disinformation. They trotted out the 51 characters from the intelligence community saying this has all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. Biden at the debate goes out of his way saying it's already been disproven. It's all nonsense. Well, but there's never been a real investigation. And hopefully, and I mean hopefully, we'll get to the bottom of this when the House of Representatives has a committee that will investigate this, or more than one committee. Now, this is my problem, by the way, with the House of Representatives. I want to segue into this, Jesse. You have at least 5 members of the Republican Party who've come out and said they're not going to vote for Kevin McCarthy for the speakership. That means that Kevin McCarthy is going to fail in getting the 218 votes he needs to be Speaker. Now, I'm asking you, as the House Democrat to the House Republican, how stupid is that? If you want to show that you're a serious political party, that you're capable of governing, that you can legislate and do investigations and oversight to make sure the truth comes out, you need to have leadership placed in the hands of the Republican Party, because the Democrats are never going to do it. And if you stop McCarthy from winning the speakership, who's going to be the Speaker? And they're going to have a responsibility of sharing the power like they did in the Senate between the Republicans and Democrats. We have equal numbers of votes on the committees and chairmanships alternating. How are you going to get the truth out? These 5 have to grow up and get into the real world, Jesse, and it's your party, not mine, but I'm an American saying this. They have to grow up. They have to get behind McCarthy. He's the guy who fought the fight to get the Republicans the majority in the House of Representatives, and this is a question of the future of this country and not their own peculiar parochial views. What say you?
I completely agree with you. I'm going to get to that in a moment. But going back to Dorsey, and I have to admit, I finally, it's a little too late and a little bit late in the game, but I applaud him because when he said he personally abandoned his efforts to push the company, Twitter, in the right direction after an activist firm, Elliott Management, got involved with the company over 2 years before that. Significant, I think it was an $11 billion or $11 million investment. I'm not sure. In his blog post, he said, quote, "This is my fault alone. I completely gave up pushing for them. When an activist entered our stock in 2020. Now, we know, and you can connect the dots, that this activist stock of Elliott Management, which is a progressive left-leaning firm, was there to set up the 2020 elections for the Democrats and Joe Biden. At the very least, this is true. And he wrote this in his review blog post this week. And I think we should really take a look at that, where he says that all the files of the Twitter files should just be dumped like a WikiLeaks version. And that's, I think, is important. Maybe we don't need all these files to be, given to us through the eyes of a journalist. We need to just let us poke around ourselves as users of Twitter. Now let's go back to your McCarthy situation. I completely agree with you. We worked for the last 4 to 6 years to take back this majority. It should have been a bigger majority, but we have the majority nonetheless. It's now important that we all take our parochial, political, and personal animus out of this equation and put the good of the country first. Because the good of the country is checks and balances against one-party rule. And that is, whether you like it or not, no one leader is perfect. Kevin McCarthy should be elected because the last thing that the Republicans want to do when they take center stage on January 3rd is to look like they're fumbling the football and can't lead. The first order of business must demonstrate that we are determined, we are straight, we are putting the people first. We do not need to play this political gamesmanship about this caucus versus that caucus. And in a majority that small and that thin, every voice counts, and every voice should be heard, and consensus should be reached so we can move America forward in a way that is consistent with the common sense conservative values that the electorate put forward. And think about it. It was New York and Florida that created, and specifically New York, this majority in the House of Representatives. Who would have thought that?
Absolutely correct. Kevin's given us the sign. I want to pick up on this when we come back after the break.
Perfect.
This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We'll be coming back for our fourth and final segment of the Long Island Report in just a moment. Stay tuned for more interesting conversation.
This episode is brought to you by the Disney Plus Hulu Max bundle with plans starting at just $16.99 a month. Stream the latest seasons of The Last of Us on Max, Andor on Disney Plus, and the final season of The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. All of these and more streaming soon. Terms apply. Visit Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle.com for more details.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. When we took the last break, we were talking about how important it is for the Republicans to show that they're grown-ups, that they can govern, they can be responsible on January 3rd when they elect and have the vote for the speakership, and why they have to get behind McCarthy. And let me tell you and why I think this is so important. One of the great powers of the legislative body, as you know, Mr. Chairman, is the power of legislative investigation and oversight. So these are issues that need to have real hearings to get the truth out to the American people so that we can govern effectively and protect and defend this country. We need to know everything about the Afghanistan withdrawal. We need to know about the COVID origin. We need to know about the allegations of Biden family influence peddling. We need to know what's going on with the Homeland Secretary doing a cover-up on the border crisis, saying the border is secure, and it's not, and we know that. I mean, 5,000 people just jumped the border again. The numbers are staggering. The deaths in fentanyl are staggering. We need to get to the border crisis. We need to get to the heart of the energy crisis and why we're doing this unilateral disarmament. So we're relying on foreign powers for our oil or for the batteries and the natural resources we need if they want to have electric cars. We need to know about all the hundreds of millions of dollars that was stolen in these pandemic fraud schemes. These are all valuable investigative hearings that have to take place, and that's why these clown car of 5 people have to get off their behinds and get real and support McCarthy, because we need a speaker who can lead. If they don't allow that, those topics I just alluded to, Jesse, will be buried, which works out just fine for the people who want to cover up the true stories. What say you?
As a Republican organizational leader, such as myself, with the 24th largest county in the country, it's important that we put aside these type of petty partisan and petty political issues and do the people's business. On January 3rd, everyone's going to raise their hand. They're going to take an oath of office, and they have to do exactly what you just pointed out. We need to investigate what's going on at the border. We need to look into Hunter Biden and see if our president's compromised. We need to look at regulations and maybe remove for every new regulation we put on forward, we need to remove 2. We need to put the finances of this country back on track so we're not, we're nearing a 31 or $3.1 trillion in debt. One of those numbers, no matter what, is $1 trillion there, and that's astronomical and it's problematic. We need to put the needs and the issues of America's families, middle class, and taxpayers first and foremost, and not these petty little battles. It's time for us to coalesce. Let's do what we need to do. Let's reach a consensus. Let's move forward and elect a Speaker of the House. Let's not leave it open. Let's not force somebody to go to another side and such. So we have a coalition government that's really just a one-party rule situation. We don't need a parliament. We need a Congress. We need a strong majority to move forward with the common sense philosophies and policies of the Republican and Conservative Party.
Well said. Let me raise another issue. You just recently had Senator Sinema of Arizona changing her registration to independent, but she said she's not going to caucus with the Republicans. She hasn't indicated yet whether she'll caucus with the Democrats. What difference does this make that she's now calling herself an independent as opposed to a Democrat? Does it have any impact at all on politics or the governance of the United States Senate?
I think what it does is that it lays out the fact that the Democrats are not going to be able to count on her vote for their extremist policies. And let's be perfectly frank. Fortunately, she has been one of the more common sense Democrats that we have that have prevented major calamity, changes to our society, changes to our electoral system, changes impacting the court herself.
Protection of the filibuster.
And Manchin, protecting the filibuster. And Manchin, did that. Despite the fact that they're in the 51-49 Senate, the fact I do believe that, and I hope that Senator Sonoma and Senator Manchin continued that tact. Her being an independent basically means they're going to have to work for her vote. I believe that I read in several publications that she's going to be getting her committee assignments through the Democratic caucus, and I believe that she is going to caucus with the Democrats. But the thing is, we know what she stands for. She's a free thinker. She's going to put the needs of Arizonans first, and one of the things that we should all be able to address together with Republicans, conservatives, and Democrats alike is the border crisis. The border crisis is allowing fentanyl, gang leaders, other drugs that cross over, possible terrorists, and such. Those individuals with criminal records from other countries are flowing freely through the border and being dispersed throughout the country into our neighborhoods. I think that, maybe we could find some common ground here with her being an independent. I think what makes his job harder is for Chuck Schumer in keeping his caucus together. And we mentioned this last week. With Senator Jeffords of Vermont. He left the Republican Party in 2001. He did it in late June, and I believe that they did it after they voted on the Bush tax cut package. He did not want to disrupt that. But after that, he changed to an independent and caucused with the Democrats because of some personality conflicts with President Bush. This is nothing new. It happens. But I think for the good of our country, if her and Manchin stick to their principles and represent Arizonans and West Virginians and Americans together, that's good for our country because it'll be a roadblock to these far left policies that the Democrats try to do when they controlled both chambers and the president.
Well, it was a tremendous loss to this country and to the Republican Party when once again, because of the bad political judgment of Donald Trump, they lost the Senate seat again. That would have been a 50-50. That would have been power-sharing arrangements. It makes a big difference. It's much better to be 50-50 than 51-49. And maybe Sinema will balance a little bit some of that. I would have much preferred to have a 50-50 Senate. Because if Sinema is going to be sitting with the Democrats in the caucus, then it's like having King of Maine and Sanders of Vermont. They call themselves independents, but they're 97% of the time with the Democratic Party. So what difference does it make? Sinema and Manchin have shown more independence, but they did get rolled, both of them, on the last big so-called inflation bill. And that was you have to hand it to the Democrats. They have a way in their Orwellian manner of capturing the language, not the reality. If that's an inflation buster, I want to know why our debt is increasing under this administration by the billions and even trillions of dollars. This is a real cost to this country.
It's amazing that Democrats, and I apologize for stepping on you, that the Democrats are championing and celebrating that, that in November, inflation was 7.1%, was at a rate of 7.1%, which was down from 7.5%. And then, of course, a little bit down from like 9% historic. These are still historic numbers of 30 and 40 years of an inflation rate. This inflation reduction boondoggle did nothing for it. And now we're on the precipice of another rate hike to try and cool this economy and put more people out of work.
Yes, I was at a lunch today and somebody said to me, "Oh, the price of gas is down." I said, "Down from when? How about where was it 2 years ago when you had a different president?" I mean, it's just amazing how they cherry pick the facts to back their ideology rather than dealing with the real facts on the ground. The real facts on the ground is that this is an inflation that's caused by the policies of the Democratic Party. They have caused this inflation. The energy crisis has led to the inflation that The taxing and the spending has led to this inflation. You've created a culture of no work where you get money for just sitting on your behind and doing nothing and not being productive and not contributing. The numbers of people who are gainfully employed, the percentage is down considerably. This is very, very bad for the future of this country. It's very, very bad for all those social programs that you want to have. It's very, very bad for your budget for Medicare and for Social Security. People have to work. They have to be productive. They have to be encouraged to work and not just sit home, eat chocolates, and watch television all day. That contributes nothing to this economy. I'm sorry?
It's not even good television. It's
no, exactly. Listen, well, unless you have the old movies, Jesse, like I, 1940s movies, then I could amuse myself for a few days watching old movies. But after that, I want to go back to work and I want to do something. So, Jesse,
we had a culture. COVID created a culture, and the Democrats maximized it to the nth degree. To take out the American spirit of self-governance, self-reliance, and the entrepreneurship. They tried to stifle because they want automatons. Those people captured by the government will always be voting for the government, and that's what the Democrats stand for. They are for big government. They want government to permeate every part of your life, whether now it's your social media, it's what you eat, what you can eat, what you see, what you read, what you hear. That's what they want. They want to capture you and have you be what basically is a hostage. Well, Republicans, we want your free spirit. We want you to take your ideas and let them take you wherever they may lead you to.
Well, that's why it's so important to have a vital two-party system, because look what the danger is. You admit the District of Columbia and you make them a state. You make Puerto Rico a state. So you can, in perpetuity, you can have permanent Democratic government. You can have a Democratic Party controlling everything. It's frightening. You'll never have a balance of power and checks and balances, because what they'll do is they'll eliminate the filibuster, and then they'll admit these places into statehood, and you're going to have 2 or 4 new United States senators, and they're always going to be Democrats. And why? Because these constituencies want a free lunch, literally and figuratively, and the Democrats are happy to give them the free lunch at taxpayers' expense as long as they have the power. This is all about using governmental money for power. And let me give you two examples, and then Kevin's given me the sign that I'm very troubled by. One is the Biden administration has indicated they want to bail out certain union pension funds with taxpayer money. What's that all about? That's about buying off the unions. That's number one. Number two, they want to have a U.S. Department of Labor rule that ESG investing is okay. They're not breaching their fiduciary duty by investing by these fly-by-night green energy deal companies. How would you like your pension, Jesse, to be invested in a whole bunch of cylinders, which are nothing but scams and frauds, which Obama said was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they went bankrupt? Is that where you want your money invested? Is that it? Is that the honest fiduciary making investment? And the Biden administration is cutting away the protections that the Trump administration protected the pension funds. You have to protect the fiduciary responsibilities for the integrity that has to low risk, best returns, and not fly-by-night schemes. And a large number of these green energy deal companies, it's all about self-dealing, it's all about self-promotion, and they're fly-by-night companies, and they're not real companies. And by the way, the last comment I want to make about this, one of the reasons FTX got so much support is it cost a fortune to buy these people off, and the cover story was this was good. This was a good ESG company that cared. It was a better ESG company than the big oil companies. You know what? What nonsense, and what it cost us. Jesse, final word.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if we just want to let these pensions run rampant, why doesn't the federal government allow an FTX to go into it? You're right. There needs to be fiduciary responsibility. We need to protect the hardworking men and women of this country who contribute to their pensions. We have to make sure that they're there and they're safe. That's the best way to protect them.
Absolutely right. Well, this is Judge Richard Weinberg signing off for Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. This has been another Long Island Report. We look forward to being with you again next week. I hope you and your families are safe and well. Thank you.